Today we embark on the final chapter of The Hobbit and its portrayal in the film The Battle of Five Armies. Our adventure begins with a farewell, the poignant moment when Bilbo bids adieu to Gandalf, before we break down the auction scene and the final shots of the movie. This is episode number 123 of Lore of the Rings, and I'm Aaron, your host and fellow Middle-earth wanderer. Before we embark on this fascinating journey, I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of you, my dedicated listeners and fellow wanderers. It's an exciting milestone for us as we've recently crossed the remarkable threshold of 200,000 total downloads for the show. You are a remarkable and unique community of wanderers, united by your passion for exploration of the world and works of J.R.R. Tolkien. However, in the vast expanse of Middle-earth, there are wanderers who are indeed lost, yearning for the enchantment and wisdom that this podcast provides. I invite you to be a guiding light for them. Share this episode with your fellow adventurers, those who seek the magic and splendor of Middle-earth. Together, let's extend our hand and lead them on this unforgettable journey through the heart of Tolkien's world. Thank you for being part of our incredible community, and let's continue to wander together in the realms of imagination and wonder. Now, let's wander.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. You could turn $10 into $250. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/fan and use code FAN. That's code FAN at prizepicks.com/fan.
Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
The adaptation of this chapter is rather short. It would seem after 2 hours and 24 minutes of battle, fighting, psychedelic dragon sickness, and cross-dressing cowards that the filmmakers wanted to hurry up and finish the film. After all, since the film is really about the dwarves, and their story is over, there's not much more to say. So Gandalf and Bilbo leave the dwarves at the doorstep of Erebor, and return to the Shire in about 20 seconds. There are some notable absences in the movie from the book. Bilbo doesn't have a farewell with the Elven King, in which he repays the king for his hospitality, and also earns the name of Elf Friend. Beorn doesn't travel with them, so we miss out on the feasting at Beorn's house at Yuletide. And there's no return to Rivendell to see the House of Elrond and be well rested and cured from the wild lands. Neither do we see Bilbo and Gandalf claiming the gold from the troll horde, although in a minute we'll see Bilbo carrying a large chest under his arm. However, one subtle clue to the passage through the lands are the landscape portrayals of their travels. First, the land is hilly and rocky, with little resilient vegetation. In the next shot, there's less hills and purple flowers dot the landscape, yet it's still fairly bare. Finally, the third shot shows lush green grass and flowing water, along with some livestock and even a hobbit rancher who looks on as Gandalf and Bilbo pass. This subtle transformation of landscapes shows the journey from the wild lands of the east to the peaceful, lush lands of the Shire in the west. Changes from the book aside, this is a brilliant film transition. At the borders of the Shire, we witness another change from the book, a farewell scene between Gandalf and Bilbo. In the book, unless you are a very careful reader, you sort of forget that Gandalf is around, and he simply slips out of the narrative, as unexpectedly and subtly as he first entered the story. One moment, you're reading this, quote, "And so they crossed the bridge and passed the mill by the river and came right back to Bilbo's own front door. And immediately you are surprised, just like Bilbo, at the unexpected auction happening at his house. Read carefully. where does Gandalf go? With the chaos of the auction, we forget that Gandalf is there, and he doesn't appear again until many years later at the doorstep with Balin. Gandalf disappears, just as the hobbits are doing their everyday commonplace practices. At the beginning of the tale, he also simply appears, when a hobbit is doing his everyday commonplace practice, sitting in the garden after breakfast smoking when, quote, Gandalf came by. Gandalf seemingly pops out of thin air, and then he seemingly pops back out of the story. Not so in the film, where Bilbo and Gandalf have a final farewell. Let's examine that scene for what it's worth. Firstly, Gandalf names the land the Shire, a name that doesn't appear in the Hobbit book, but we know from Lord of the Rings. Then Gandalf doesn't even enter the Shire, leaving Bilbo at what he calls the border. They then have a discussion about luck, a quality which both book and film Bilbo seem to have more than their fair share of. But this turns into a warning from the wizard. Don't underestimate magic rings. In the film, Gandalf says he knows that Bilbo found one, which in the book, Bilbo came right out and told the whole dwarvish company about the ring. Bilbo looks like a child caught in a lie, but still tries to cover his tracks with another lie, that he dropped the ring during the battle. This lie, which Gandalf seems to see through, prompts Gandalf to say this tweaked line from the book, quote, I am very fond of you, but you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world after all. And that's the last we see of Gandalf. So unlike The Lord of the Rings, where the disruption in the Shire was completely ignored in the film, the Hobbit film instead does include the chaos in the Shire after Bilbo returns in the form of a short auction scene. The scene, like the book, is pretty concise, with most hobbits being confused and surprised that Bilbo is actually alive, including Lobelia Saxville Baggins. However, in contrast with the book, the auction master asks Bilbo for something official with his name on it. Fortunately, through all his adventures, Bilbo has retained the paper contract he signed at the beginning of the journey. Apparently, that is enough to authenticate that he is indeed Bilbo Baggins and alive. However, because at every turn this film needs to remind us who the main character of the film is, even this scene turns from the Hobbit to the dwarf. Bilbo is asked who the person is that Bilbo offered his services to which he replies, quote, he was my friend. As Bilbo walks through Bag End, a familiar image comes to mind. Frodo returning to the Shire in The Return of the King, and also walking through Bag End. However, this scene feels different. Bag End is empty and messy as if it's been ransacked. Indeed it has been, whereas Frodo's Bag End was still cluttered in the regular fashion of hobbits. Yet Frodo is unsettled and feels like he can't emotionally be back, whereas Bilbo knows he has returned home. The embroidered handkerchiefs make an appearance, a nod to the book, where the handkerchiefs had popped up in a couple of different places. Bilbo begins to put his life back together, which includes hanging up pictures. One picture stands out, that of his mother, who, if you remember, was a Took. It's a subtle reminder that Bilbo has found a balance between his adventurous Took side and his Baggins side, that he has put the Took side back in its place, and while he straightens the picture of his Baggins father, reminds us that the Baggins part of him is now corrected. Now, in the book, we don't get much allusion to the ring Bilbo found. It's not really mentioned very much in the final pages. However, in the film, the internal struggle to resist the allure of the One Ring is a pivotal moment. Bilbo's inner turmoil is vividly portrayed, showcasing the lasting impact of his adventure. With the sudden transition of Bilbo at the end of his adventure to 60 years later, and he's still holding the ring in his hand, it's as if Bilbo has thought of nothing else for all those 60 years, obsessing over his little golden ring. And finally, the scene ends with Gandalf arriving at the door of Bag End, in exactly the same way as in the Fellowship of the Ring film, but rather from Bilbo's perspective inside. This is a nice tie-in to the other film, and a decent nod to the final scene of the book, where Gandalf and Balin arrive to reminisce with Bilbo. The scene and the film and the whole film trilogy ends with Bilbo and Gandalf laughing in the background, and a close-up of the map that Gandalf gave to Thorin in the very beginning. the same map that is included in every edition of The Hobbit, likely drawn in Tolkien's own hand, gives us a loving summary of the entire adventure. As our journey through the final scenes of the Hobbit films comes to a close, I hope you've enjoyed our exploration of the similarities and differences between these two captivating narratives. It's a reminder of the intricate dance between literature and film, where choices made by filmmakers can reshape the essence of a beloved story. As we part ways for now, I encourage you to reflect on the enduring magic of Middle-earth. These tales, whether on the page or on the screen, continue to inspire and captivate us, even enchant us, reminding us that adventures await around every corner. Thank you for joining me on this adventure, and remember, the road goes ever on. Until next time, keep wandering, keep exploring, and keep the spirit of Middle-earth alive in your heart. Safe travels, fellow wanderers. My friends, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing with your friends. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Lore of the Rings Podcast. For feedback on the show, please email me using the link in the show notes. Until next Thursday, remember, not all those who wander are lost.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. You could turn $10 into $250. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/fan and use code FAN. That's code FAN at prizepicks.com/fan.
Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.